everybody, and welcome to our podcast today. I'm Paula, the founder and director of Exam Officers and Data Solutions Limited, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Heather from Highgrove Education. Heather, do you just want to do an introduction and tell us about Highgrove Education?
Yeah, thank you so much, Paula. My name's Heather Rhodes. I'm the principal and the founder of Highgrove Education. Highgrove is a online secondary school that serves students who want to have a top independent school education, but online from home rather than attending a physical school. We have students all over the world from, I think, over 30 countries in the school, but the majority of students are UK based, 60% in the UK, 40% overseas. And our students, as you would expect for a secondary school, take GCSEs and then A levels, and then typically go off to top universities afterwards. We cater for academically ambitious kids who want to get the most out of their education, but want to get their education in a slightly alternative way to traditional schooling.
So, do you do things like helping with UCAS applications as well, that, should we call it, a traditional school would help with?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I mean, we do all of the things that you would expect from a traditional independent school. So, yeah, we have coaches who work with students every week, one to one. That's both coaching them to help them stay on top of their learning, but also with our older students working with them on their future plans, their university applications, work experience, and so on. We have clubs and societies. We have a whole range of elective courses. We have a house system and house meetings and assemblies. All of the typical things that you would have at a school alongside the academic curriculum. Obviously, there's some restrictions. We don't have a first football team, although we do have some professional footballers actually, because online schooling works quite well for kids who are ambitious athletes and have a really heavy training program and need to fit their education around that. So, yeah, UCAS support. We're a registered UCAS centre, and certainly we've full on with our year 13s at the moment as they're getting their university offers back, and invites to interview at Oxford and Cambridge and some of the other universities that have interviews as part of their approach. So yeah, we're very much involved with UCAS.
Yeah, I think would work really well for students who come from families. I mean, I'm from a military background. My father was in the forces, so I remember moving from school to
Mm.
school, while the online homeschooling would mean that you can access, you're still having the same teacher, but you could be moving around the world and you're having that sort of consistency in your education.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a reason why several students study with us, because they want the continuity of education, but they're going to be moving during the school year. Sometimes they've got, sometimes just as you said, from a military background, and families who relocate or know that they're going to be relocating at some point in the future and don't want to interrupt GCSEs or A levels. I think in the past, it would have been more common for those families to send their child to boarding school. But
Yes.
actually, boarding school is a great solution for many kids, but not for everyone. And for some kids, it's their worst nightmare. And some families are very, very close, don't like the thought of splitting up due to work relocations. So online schooling is a way that you can take your school with you regardless of where you're going to be living, as long as you've got a decent internet connection.
Yeah.
Mm.
Have you seen any changes in homeschooling since COVID then? Did that change sort of that type of school?
So I think COVID made a lot more kids aware of online schooling as an option. And the emergency provision that lots of schools provided during COVID, in some ways, it's a really bad advertisement for online schooling, because, of course, it's not going to be a great experience because schools didn't have much time to prepare. They didn't have specialists on the team who had studied online teaching approaches, didn't have teachers on the team who were used to working online, and there is a lot of changes that you need to make in your the delivery of your programs to make it work well for an online environment. On the other hand, there were certainly kids who were studying online, working a little bit more independently, and found that away from the kind of disruptions, the kind of sensory overload of a of a busy school environment, they could focus much better, and they made more progress when they were working more independently. So I think in some ways it kind of propelled a trend that was already in place. There were certainly online schools pre-COVID. I was running a Harrow school online pre-COVID, and I know there were other schools in also operating in the online world, but it's certainly been massive growth post-COVID as more students, more families are aware of that option. And I think also societal change has sped up since COVID. So more people work from home, more families expect slightly more flexibility. And traditional schools haven't really changed much in that respect. There's little flexibility, there's little scope for kids to work from home as part of their school week. And so some families, an online education is a better fit for their lifestyle and their needs.
Okay. And then the last few months, I've been going to some primary schools because my granddaughter's going to be starting school next September. It's really exciting. So we've gone to various open days. So how can sort of parents or guardians get a feel for the school when it's online? Because you're not going to have that traditional sort of open day to walk around.
Yeah, well, I mean, several ways really. We run taster lessons for students who want to find out what it's like to study a particular subject at the school. We invite students to kind of sit in on classes if they'd like to meet the teachers, to chat with the people who are already at the school, both parents and students. We've got some school ambassadors on our student team who are always very happy to talk about their experiences of transitioning to an online education. To be honest, in some ways, it's easier than with a physical school because you're not restricted to going on a particular day for the open day.
Yeah, particular day, particular time, and you've got 10 minutes to walk around. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I know supporting exams team, which is a big sort of service that we offer as a company, seeing the exam fees increase year on year and quite significant. We see schools and £120,000 in summer exam fees, and then you've got the deadlines when they double and when they triple. What are your sort of thoughts on that increase in exam fees and exam fees in general?
I think the difficult thing for the families that we work with about exam fees is that any family who is out of traditional schooling will need to foot the bill themselves for their exam fees unless they have an EHCP plan and the local authority is paying for their education and will also then pay for their exam fees. So for students, most student we have some students in that situation, but most of the students who study with us, they're paying to study with us. It's an independent education, and they're also having to pay for their exam fees. The homeschoolers in general, so kids who find that the school system hasn't worked for them, and so parents take their child out of school, and homeschoolers wanting to follow the national curriculum, go through GCSEs, go through A levels potentially onto career or university. One of the biggest restrictions for them is having to pay for their own exam fees. It means that some families will be able to afford to do that for their children and others won't. And I mean, our fees are much cheaper than an independent school, but they're still a barrier to some families who aren't able to attend a traditional school. And the exam fees add to that barrier. Love to see the government looking at covering the cost of exam fees for all students, whether they're educating in a traditional school or home educating or educating in an independent school, to bring a little bit of equity because for families who have chosen to homeschool, for many of those families, it is a last resort after having tried traditional education and finding that it just hasn't worked for them. And so to then have to additionally face the barrier of having to pay for their exams, it's a challenge for some families.
Yeah. I know sometimes for us it's a challenge. A school will spend over £100,000 on exam entries. They've got a new member of the exams team and they won't pay for the training. And you think, but it's a balancing act. You're spending all of that money and actually the students' outcomes could be impacted, but you're not giving this person that the training that they actually need. But the awarding bodies are getting huge amounts of money every year. And certainly, I mean, I've been involved in the exams arena for 20 years now, and the things that the awarding bodies used to do now that have come to the exams team and the exams officers to actually run. But the exam entry fees are increasing every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a question over the way we structure exams in this country. I mean, exams are run by private companies who are trying to make a return on profits to send back to their shareholders. And the best interests of that private company is to make the largest profit margin that they can for their shareholders. That's their purpose as a company,
Mm.
which conflicts with the need for schools and for families to be able to take exams and to be able to afford those exams. And money's tight at the moment in the school system. Independent schools have been hit by VAT, and the parents are having to pay higher fees in general than previously. State schools are struggling with budgets. I think that's something that's gone on for many years now.
Mm.
And as there are more students being diagnosed with special educational needs, more money needs to go towards providing for those students. It also makes examinations more expensive because there are more access arrangements to consider. And so there is a question of whether we've got the system right at the moment, whether exams should be provided by organisations that are for profit, and also whether there really need to be, I think, is it 5 or 6 different exam boards operating in the UK?
Yes.
Which makes it a challenge for schools and for families who are homeschooling, having to decide between the different curriculums, having to adapt materials and courses anytime they might want to change exam boards. I'm not convinced we've got the right system in place at the moment, and perhaps having a single national body that was not for profit and set exams, and not having a kind of range of profit making organizations involved in the design and delivery of exams might be a long term aim that would help both with the cost of those exams, and from a school's and a family point of view, make it slightly cleaner and easier just having one provider rather than several.
Yeah, and we've seen a huge increase, or I think we have, in private exam centres across the UK, for people that are homeschooling so they can take exams. But looking at the costs of some of those companies, I know a parent contacted us asking if we had any advice or if we could signpost any others because the fees in which they was getting charged to actually go and sit their exams in a private exam centre, there was a huge markup even on the awarding body fees, which would make it not accessible for them to be able to go to.
Yeah, so we work with students when they join us to find an exam centre, and there's such a wide range of prices between different private exam centres. And it's even broader when you look internationally, because we've
Mm.
got lots of students based internationally. Finding them a centre can be a challenge. Finding them a centre at a reasonable price, at a reasonable distance for them to attend, can be even more difficult, to be honest. It is a difficulty for families, and some families are having to travel quite some way to take exams. I mean, some of our international students actually have come to London and stayed in London for a couple of weeks previously, specifically to take their exams in the summer. We had a student who was living in Zaporizhia in Ukraine, by the front lines, who had to travel to Poland to take
Wow.
exams, which is dangerous apart from
Yes.
anything. But the issue with exam centres, I think there are some great exam centres and there are some less great exam centres. The cost of those centres varies widely and doesn't necessarily correlate to the quality of the centre, which means for homeschoolers, there's a lot of work to do to identify which centre would be right for you. It's also one of the reasons we're really excited about the new Pearson EdExcel program of remote invigilation, because it allows people to take exams from home. And for some students, like that student in Zaporizhia, I mean, that would have been a wonderful thing to be able to offer to that student.
Yeah. Have you started offering remote invigilation then? Are you at that point where you're able to offer it for some qualifications?
Yeah, that's right. So this summer, we think we're speaking to our families at the moment. We think several of them will want to take remote invigilation for their exams. It's not a perfect solution for every family. Some families might actually find it more convenient going to an exam centre. There are kind of restrictions in terms of the place that you can take your exams. Not everyone will have a quiet room where they can't be disturbed, which meets
Yeah.
all of the criteria. As a candidate, you need to have a parent at home or an adult in the same building with you while you're taking your exams, and not everyone has a parent or an adult who would be able to be available for that. So I don't think it will work for every family, but for some families, I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity. And kudos to Pearson for offering that. They're the first exam organisation to roll out remote invigilation, and I know they're taking it quite slowly. I think this is the third year now of their program. They're gradually expanding that trial to invite more and more centres to join them. It's mostly online schools at the moment who are offering remote invigilation. But I do think in the long term, as that program expands and both the examining bodies and those involved in the invigilation get more and more experience, the ability to roll out on a larger scale and to have really organisation and administration of that remote invigilation is only going to increase, which has got to be a great thing for families who would benefit from taking exams from home.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing. It's not going to be for everybody because for some people, they won't have that technology or the money to be able to buy even a laptop or a computer in the home. But for some students, like you said, the student overseas that can be in a country that's dangerous at the moment due to the situation in the world, it can mean that they can access their exams when they wouldn't normally be able to without putting themselves at risk of travel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that use case is just an amazing example of how you can make a real tangible difference to a student and their future. I mean, we were lucky that our student was able to travel to Poland, was able to take his exams. He's now in the UK at a top university, studying computer science,
Oh,
and got straight A stars in his A levels. Now, if he hadn't been able to take his examinations, he would have had a slightly different pathway open to him, and it's fortunate that he could. Remote invigilation hopefully will mean that there are more opportunities for students who are in situations where actually attending a physical centre would be a challenge. And I mean, that includes with lots of students who want to study online because they find kind of social settings can be either distracting or make them feel anxious. And so, for a student who has social anxiety, going to an exam centre to take their exams is the last thing that they need. It really does. It can impact performance if you're somebody who finds it either stressful or distracting to be away from an environment that you know well and that you're comfortable in. I
Mm.
mean, to be honest, even for students who don't have social anxiety, online schooling for other reasons, going to an exam centre that they don't know to take their exams, it's still a big thing.
Yeah, it can have a huge impact. Within schools, we sort of make sure the environment's right for everybody, the room set up, but then suddenly we were expecting some students to go somewhere that's strange to them with people that they don't know. It can have a huge impact. So,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a question about exams as a way of differentiating between students, particularly given the type of thing that's tested in exams currently. A lot of them are knowledge-based tests, and knowledge is not going to be the currency needed most by students who are going into the future workplace. Other skills and attributes, things like entrepreneurial thinking, proactivity, critical thinking, being able to engage with others in a team and work collaboratively in order to problem solve. These are all things that are probably more important than the knowledge that you might be able to learn and retain and regurgitate in an examination situation. And yet they're not things that in any way are currently tested or kind of form part of the judgment process for the teenagers who go on to further education and careers.
well, thank you today, Heather, for your thoughts and sharing the work that you do. Any sort of last thoughts to share with our listeners on homeschooling or the exam system?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say, for families who are thinking about home education, it can be there are always going to be difficulties involved, and working through how you're going to take exams is definitely one of them. The key thing to consider is your child happy? What environment is going to make them thrive? And if they're really unhappy and really not thriving in their current environment, it's worth looking at making a change, whether that's to an online school, to a different school, to a homeschooling program. The main thing we want from our young people is for them to be happy, safe, and feeling like they're in a place from which they can thrive personally as well as academically. And so, if exams is one of the things that's putting you off from making the change, there are solutions, and it won't be an easy journey, but sometimes doing something that's slightly more difficult to kind of organize and work out yourself in the long term is worthwhile for the well-being of your child.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today, Heather. That's really been interesting. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Lovely to speak.